To create the leaves on my tree, I end up using the particle emitter. I end up finding this very highly technical tutorial that had a lot of things we hadn't even seen in class, if any of them, to make these like bushy type of shapes that will be the cup of my tree. Now, I ended up understanding from the video that we were doing is that we were making the cube into the sphere because it had the round basic shape that we needed, and then duplicated it so that one object will, in a way, dictate how the other object looked and emit the shape into the other one in a way that it wouldn't kill the computer as well, because we were going to have to duplicate this a lot. So also we used the hair in a very interesting way, that it wasn't just to create hair as it is, but rather to give us the shapes that we needed, that will create like these individual sections of a bush into a single object. And here you can see that now I have like these little bulbs that now became that I can scale up and down into this big atom looking thing that will later on become our basic bush type of shape. Now this involved a lot of tweaking around and changing from one object to the other, and I had to be very careful about it, because if you get one step wrong and you add or change a setting in one object that wasn't supposed to be changed, then you won't get the end results that you need. That's why you see me pausing kind of a lot, but I really like doing that because I learned a lot about modifiers that otherwise I wouldn't have learned. Just like here, you can see me changing the settings on the particle modifier, emitter modifier, and selecting it into the other object so that both shapes will be somehow intertwined and affect each other in the way that we need it, so that we will achieve the final shape that I needed. And also I used the decimate modifier that we had used before, and it was interesting to, like, even though I had learned that the stacking of the modifiers always affect your model, it was interesting to see how you can also do it. This can also play a role in your favor, right? You can move the modifier up if you need it up, and this can help you achieve greater control over your model. It's not the modifiers that control your model, but you that actually control how the modifiers affect your model. And so here you can see how I'm again in the rendering settings, and I'm playing around with the emitters, and I'm playing with the volumes and different technical settings, and duplicating my object and going back into the particle emitter, and then now sculpting this field that seems like nothing changed even though the other one is fully changed, and just making it like somehow bulbous and giving it some balls as well all over it, and making it look very strange. But this is because this shape is going to now affect again the other shape that we have already created, and now you can see now how that we have changed the other object, how this object has now changed. So, and if we go to when I went to the modifier and I added the data transfer, I also had to duplicate another object, and I learned that we were using the data transfer modifier so that the properties from one object will go into the other one without, in a way that wouldn't kill the computer, to give us this very special shape that is very smooth and very different from the one we were making, but that it has the texture of it in a strange way that wouldn't be possible if we didn't have the particle emitter, because all of these shapes, they are affecting one another, and they're independent but they're intertwined, and they work with one another to give us the final shape that we will have to create like these little bushy sections that we use to construct the cup of our tree. Now you can see that I really have this very kind of realistic looking kind of bush that would look like it has been painted in black and white or from a black and white photography. And you can see me here playing a little bit with the lights, which I did it in purpose because the person in the video also did it. And I wanted to see if mine will have the same effect if I have done it right. And I was actually quite happy to see that I did it right, especially because this tutorial was so technical and it seemed quite advanced. And I was glad that I managed to use it because I learned a lot how to use the tools that I have and not allow them to use me or limitate me just because, oh, this is what it says it is for. Well, actually, you can make this into whatever you want. And I think that is something that is always what I want to know. I want to know what is the limit of the tools that I have. How much can I do and what is that I can use them for. Now we're gonna go into the texture mapping of part of this, and we end up deleting the principal BSDF and making like our own costume texture map in a way for our object. I learned a lot about texture mapping in all of the tutorials or things that I tried to follow. We ended up always just deleting the principal BSDF and not even using Node Wrangler. I added the add-on so that I will have like the other shortcuts, but all the texture mappings I end up using were being made manually, like this one. And what we were doing with these ones, like we were seeking to like shade the tree in a way that like how we would regularly shade it in if it were like a painter. So that's what you can see me doing here, that I'm adding like different colors and then so that it gets shaded differently depending on where the light is hitting. So I have like a darker shade, a mid shade, and then I have a very light shade. And this is just to like set up our shadows and light areas for later on give a color. But it was incredibly interesting to see like how actually you can use with such versatility all the texture mapping. And even after, when I will go more intuitively into modeling other stuff, the first thing I will always do now is delete the principal BSDF, because I have learned of ways of using it for myself instead of just using whatever I'm being given. And that was something very special for me, learning how to use this for my own benefit without the limitations of like, oh yeah, just add whatever texture with Node Wrangler, and yeah, that's how we add a texture, which is a good technique that you can use for very simple stuff. But when you're trying to do like a more personal look to things, for me it was very important to learn how to do this, and I end up taking from it something that I truly needed and wanted. And the last thing you're gonna see me doing now is that I made this little bushy thing into a collection, and this is so that every time that we want to duplicate this object, the computer is only calculating one instead of several objects, so that it doesn't dice.